All right, being 7 o'clock, we'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing because following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
And
under God,
one
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we will have the reading of the notice, please.
The adjourned organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, September 21st at 7 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. And I would like to request everyone, please silence your cell phones and any other electronic devices as to not be an interruption to the meeting. And I would proceed to item number 5, roll call, and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Arstead. Here. Beestrom. Bizotto. Here. Boots. Book.
Here.
Butke.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Seiler.
Here.
Conway.
Here.
Dickinson.
Here.
Drebeck.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Gaber.
Here.
Gibbs.
Here.
Gonering.
here.
Guild. Gums.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Krause.
Here.
Lamont.
Here.
Longenhan.
Here.
Leahy.
Here.
Lowe.
Here.
Mask.
Here.
McEwen.
Here.
Oberbeck.
Here.
Opal.
Here.
Robinson.
Here.
Rosenberg.
Here.
Schley.
Here.
Seefeld.
Here.
Soibert.
Here.
Van Cray.
Here.
Vol. Zhang.
Here.
Boots.
Here.
Guild. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have with us this evening, along with the viewing audience. And we will proceed on to educational presentation reports. Item B7, educational presentation on the 2022 budget assumptions. And we have the chair of the Finance Committee, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had some requests after last year's budget to provide the county board with more information relative to what goes into making or developing the budget. And we rely on a series of assumptions that are developed by county administration, particularly the finance director, Palmer, and Lance as the administrator. And we'd like to tonight just provide you with an overview of some of those assumptions that go into crafting the budget and guiding how we're spending the money. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lance and Christy for an overview of it. And later, we'll also be talking about the capital improvement program budget.
Thank you, Chair Robinson, and Christy, you can have the podium. Christy, I'll be seated. So I'll start with just a real quick overview. The Finance Department has Finance Department and the HR Finance and Property Committee have really been busy. We're in the middle of our budget preparation work. Completed just about all of our departmental meetings with all of Marathon County departments and all the other entities that historically this body has funded through its annual budget. And moving forward, what the next step that many of the people on the HR Finance and Property Committee, all of the people on the HR Finance and Property are going to see, and all of you are going to see in the recording of the Standing Committee presentations, is going to be on October 5th. And that's the date that the budget will transition from Marathon County Administration and the Finance Department to this body, and specifically to the HR Finance and Property Committee. They will then have their meeting on the 5th, as well as their meeting on the 12th, if they desire to consider that budget before moving it on to the county board for ultimate approval later in November, and you will have your public hearing, of course, on November 4th. But the point of our very brief presentation today, we know you've had quite a number of presentations this month, but the point of our presentation today is to give you a little bit of an overview of those budget assumptions, like HR Finance and Property Committee Robinson, the Chair Robinson referenced. The budget is really a product of a number of assumptions, and we're here to answer any questions you may have. But within your packet today, specifically packet number 2, there is a chart, a graph showing the budget assumptions that we have put in place for the Marathon County 2022 budget assumptions. And we also, Christie left within that document the 2021 assumptions that this body had used, that administration had used in putting together that budget, which I think really gives you some good context. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christie, and I will add any anecdotes that I think are necessary as they come up, but you'll see we'll just work right through the chart. And again, in the event you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. But again, this is within your, within the packet, specifically packet number 2. It's a 1-page document that you can all access. And again, if you have any questions today, reach out during the meeting or after, and we'll be sure to answer those.
All right, what we usually do is we put together a budget assumptions. And as County Minister Leonard said, what happens is we reach out to the departments to have them put together their budget. But instead of just them coming up with all the numbers they want, we have given this to Finance Committee for review. And right now it was in the hands of the departments, and they have the budget assumptions. And then again, they meet with County Administrator Leonard. And then as of probably tomorrow, we're gonna roll that budget over to his purview, so he's going to be in control of it. And then he hands it again off to the Finance Committee starting on October 5th. They handle it through, I believe, October 12th is their last meeting. And then they provide it to the county board, of which you'll have a public hearing, I believe, November 4th, and then vote on it the next week. So at this point, budget assumptions that we use are basically in most standard forms. Biggest ones that we have are personnel costs. So those are the ones that have the most changes in them. Right now, we've assumed a 3% cost, what we would have used to call cost of living increase, but we do have pay for performance. So the overall net increase in wages in total would be 3% overall. Although individual employees, except for those in the union, that would be the sheriff deputies and lieutenants, would have a net effect of 3% lift over all payroll budgets. The next item that we have that was a highlight is 6% on health insurance, which is about what the average inflationary cost of medical insurance is at this time. We are currently working with USI to provide us some more guidance in the future on not only our health insurance, but some of our additional benefit plans, so that we have a more modernized benefit plan moving forward. The other interesting one is the Wisconsin retirement system. And we've given a contribution history down below at the bottom of that. But what the interesting thing is with the Wisconsin retirement system is that the employer pays a portion, which for 2022 is 6.5%, down from a contribution rate of 6.75%. And the employee provides its same contribution in the case of all employees except protected, which statutorily has a different contribution rate. So in many cases, private employers may have the employee giving up to a certain percentage contribution for retirement, and the company will match up to a certain percentage. But statutorily, if you are in the Wisconsin retirement system, the employee and employer contributions are determined by the actuaries that are run by the ETF, and we are told what those contributions will be. We have 3 categories of employees: general, elected, and protected class. So that contribution rate for the employee and the employer has gone down for 2022. But overall, it stays pretty stable because they've been able to manage their ability to keep their returns at a goal of 7% over a 10-year period. It's over that right now. So that's an actual benefit to us. The other items that are in benefits that you want to take a look at are workers' comp. Workers' comp is up 23.8%, but last year they took it down 20%. So really in a smoothing average, it's really going to probably be up slightly over 3% because they had reduced it considerably last year. And the other one is unemployment. That's up 10%. We are not, governments in Wisconsin are not, we do not pay into the unemployment insurance fund. We are what they call reimbursable. So any claims made against the county by employees that are valid, we actually pay based on a statutory dollar amount based on their rolling 4-quarter period prior to the claim. So we actually have an internal rate that we determine is what we charge to payroll based on wages, so that we have kind of an internal insurance fund for unemployment. So when claims are made, then we have a fund to pay those out of. So that's not only what we have to put together for the budget, but a little bit, for those of you in the private sector, how we're a little bit different. And so we try to make it work in a way that makes sense to us, but also then allows us to kind of explain that to people that are in the real world, not in our government world. With that, the other one is other insurance is 2%, and that hopefully we can maintain. There's a hardening market because of a lot of, you just open the newspaper, there's suits against municipalities, there's fires, hurricanes. I know we don't have fires or hurricanes, but so just in general, national cybersecurity insurance is a little bit of a tough cookie right now, so we're hopeful that we'll be able to manage that. And then the rest of our costs are 5% increase in debt service, and we are looking at a goal of about 2% overall for department budgets. Just a purview of how hard County Administrator Leonard's working. He's had people come in with a 49% increase and a -1% increase, so he's been working hard at getting it to around a target of 2 to 3%, and then the real work gets going when we provide what we have based on our levy limits to the Finance Committee, and then allow you the deliberations on how you want that budget to be shaped for next year, 2022. That's kind of where we're at. That's kind of where we are as a county. Again, this part of the year I like because I like numbers, and there's a whole bunch of them. Some are really small and some are really big. And if you have any questions, otherwise we're just going to keep moving forward with it, and we'll provide it to the Finance Committee in October.
If I could just add one thing, or a couple points probably. So Christy referenced salaries and health insurance. I mean, those are at the top of the list. If you do want additional context, I encourage you guys, we do have our financial, on the financial department page, we have all the annual budgets. You can go back and look, and when we talk about salaries, wages, employee compensation, I encourage you to get that context. If you look at page 13 of last year's budget message, you'll see how much of our overall budget is made up by people, and that's not unique, but certainly it's a feature of government. Our total tax levy supported payroll from last year was in excess of $37 million. Our total payroll overall was just shy of $70 million. And similarly, you can see on in that document the importance of health insurance. Like Christy referenced, we realize we need to have a long-term sustainable health insurance plan. We've been working with a consultant that I think has really proven valuable to this point, given us a lot of good insight. But our health insurance, we spend pretty close to, rule of thumb is $1 million a month. So when we're talking about an increase of, if we're talking about a 6.5 or 6% increase, a 6.5% increase is just shy of $800,000 thereabouts. So when you talk about bringing in new tax levy through net new construction of about 950,000, let's just say that's what our number has been. That's what it was about last year, 950,000. If we have a pretty substantial increase in health insurance, that's all of that money, and that ignores inflation, which is a thing for the costs that we do have. So like Christy said, we're continuing to attempt to be good stewards, but those budget assumptions are really, really helpful, and we work with the HR Finance and Property Committee to set those. And again, I think the most important one that you'll hear me talk a lot about when I do deliver the budget message, and when you read it, is going to be employee compensation. You'll see from the historical figures, if you do look at the last year's budget message, we're putting in 3%. We're making it hard on departments then to try to be as tight in terms of budgeting as we can. But to compete, I think all of you in your private lives, certainly in your public lives of service on this board, you understand how tight the labor market is. And we really need to invest in, quite honestly, our most important asset, which is by far our people. So with that, I went longer than I had hoped for a short presentation, but happy to answer any questions you guys might have about those budget assumptions or where we are right now.
Questions for the finance director and/or the administrator? Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you. I want to bring a little bit more context to this. So we've got a budget, this year's budget is $181 million, and $52 million comes from property tax, and the rest comes from other sources, including shared revenue, transportation aids, grants, and other things. So it's the shell game of moving those figures around to reflect them, and we'll get our final general transportation aid package right before the budget's approved. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but today they're focusing primarily on the expense side. The revenue side many times is beyond our control unless we're looking at what fees we charge, and we're constrained by levy limits, which we all understand, and it'll be a lot of work between now and early November.
Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair. I was reading about this just yesterday, about how the different counties have different kinds of property taxes and retail tax levy and levies and things like that. And I was wondering, how is our budget for this coming year? Are we tight? Are things falling short? And if so, I thought it might be interesting, and I was thinking that because the county can determine, from my understanding, the county can change like the retail tax from 0.5. Different counties have different retail taxes. And I was wondering if it would be possible, if we could possibly have an alcohol tax or increase the sales tax. Thank you.
First off, the county has the option to have a 0.5% sales tax, which this county has already adopted. It does not have the luxury of changing an alcohol tax on beer or spirits at all. It does not have the option to increase sales tax more than what is currently being assessed, which is the 0.5% sales tax. So I am not sure where you're getting that information, Supervisor, but the county does not have that luxury of setting sales tax other than the 0.5% sales tax, and does not have the authority at all in statute to change the alcohol tax at all. Any other discussion? Okay, moving on to item C, the consent agenda. Item C8, through item C12B2. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Butke and seconded by Supervisor Seefeld. Is there any discussion on agenda items C8 through item C12B2? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve items C8 through item C12B2 signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We will move on to item D, Memorial, Life and Public Service of William Bill Miller. What is your pleasure? Motion by Vice Chair McEwen, second by Supervisor Robinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to support the memorial for the life and public service of William Miller signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion is carried, and I'd ask the clerk to read the memorial.
Life and Public Service of William Bill Miller. Bill Miller, 78, passed away on September 5th, 2021 at his home in Rib Mountain. He was born July 14th, 1943 in Beaver Dam to George and Ruth Miller. He attended UW-Whitewater, where he majored in accounting and economics. Bill is survived by his wife Cindy, a sister and brother, 3 children, and 5 grandchildren. Bill faithfully served his community, the town of Rib Mountain, for many years, serving as town chair and auditor. He lent his skills as a CPA to many local communities and nonprofits. He helped to establish the Rib Mountain Sanitary District and served on its Board of Commissioners until his death. Bill was also an active volunteer throughout his life, giving of his time and resources to the Rib Mountain Community Festival, Badger State Winter Games, Rib Mountain Lions Club, Evening Optimists, and the Montessori School of Wausau. Bill served the residents of District 36 in the town of Rib Mountain on the county board for 12 years, retiring in 2020. During that time, he served on the Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee, Health and Human Services Committee, and the Executive Committee. He also served the North Central Healthcare Board on the Finance and Nursing Home Committees. In the passing of Bill Miller, we have lost a leader who was dedicated to serving his community in numerous ways. He is hereby honored and remembered for his faithful public service. Now therefore be it resolved by the Marathon County Board of Supervisors that they enter this memorial into the proceedings of the board out of respect for the memory of William Bill Miller. A copy of this memorial shall be sent to his family with the sympathies of the board.
Thank you. Now we will have a moment of silence in remembrance of Mr. Miller. Thank you. Craig, you had something else? No, okay, all right, thank you. We'll move on to resolutions, and from Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee, item E14, amending the 2021 CIP for the Enterprise Resource Planning System, ERP, create it as a priority CIP project and provide a multi-year CIP project budget and funding of the project, Resolution 61-21. Motion by Supervisor Robinson and second by Supervisor Fisher. Any discussion? Supervisor Robinson.
Before we get to the motion, earlier today we found that there was an adding or a addition error or omission, and we didn't include the teller software installation at a cost of $139,874 and the Eclipse integration training at $3,500. resulting in an increased cost of $143,374. Because we have a motion before us, I would move to amend the resolution wherever the amount of $4,056,524 appears, to delete that in 3 different places, the 5th and 9th, whereas, and in the first point under the now, therefore be it resolved, to change that to $4,202,888.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Rosenberg. Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed to the amendment signify by saying no. Motion is carried unanimously. And now to any further discussion on the motion as amended. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion of amending the 2021 CIP for the Enterprise Resource Planning System, ERP system, create it as a priority CIP project and provide a multi-year CIP project budget and funding of the project. Resolution 61-21 as amended. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the motion is carried, and it is unanimous. Thank you. And we will move on to item E of 15, consideration of the initial resolution approving revenue bond financing for Bug Tussle Wireless LLC, Resolution 62-21. What is your pleasure? Supervisor Seiler with the motion. Is there a second? Second with Supervisor Leahy. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion of consideration of the initial resolution approving revenue bond financing for Bug Tussle Wireless LLC, Resolution 62-21, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion is carried and it is unanimous. And we will move on to item E16, a resolution approving the 2022 Capital Improvement Program projects, Resolution 63-21. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Christensen and second by Supervisor Butke. Supervisor Robinson.
I'd like to just put some context to what we're doing tonight. This is basically a culmination or the assembling of all the projects that have been submitted to the HR, Finance, and Property Committee, and we're putting them before you. Some of them will be funded next year, some will be funded in future years. It's meant to be a longer-term document. This is a planning tool, but it needs to come before you so that we can begin to develop the capital side of the budget. Supervisor Leahy has led a work group looking at how we can modify the capital improvement process in the future. Historically, we have carved out rolling stock or replacement of our vehicles, the Sheriff's Department, Parks Department, and others. We've also set aside 35% for information technology. And then we're going to run through the community or the capital improvement process with a separate committee. That committee has served us well, made recommendations, and it got to the county board and we scratched our head and said, what do we do with it? So this year we suspended the role of that capital improvement committee and rather began to rely more on facilities management to begin developing recommendations. What was happening before is projects like the library roof repair didn't make it and didn't score. And all of a sudden, a $500,000 project became a $1 million plus project because we deferred the maintenance when we should have been working on it. So we're hoping that the new approach will be facility focused and get into more life cycle analysis and do a better job. But these are the projects that have been delineated. We have not come up with the funding that will be, again, part of the budgeting process. So when we approve the budget, there will be the final capital improvement program list with the funding source identified for your review and approval. And again, with this resolution, we have the old numbers for the employee resource program on page 2, and I would have moved to amend it, deleting the number in the first line on page 2 to $4,202,888.
Is there a second to the amendment? Vice Chair McEwen with a second. Is there any discussion on the amendment? The amendment is, again, to change the dollar figure on the ERP system to the accurate number as stated by the chair. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed to the amendment signify by saying no. The amendment carries. Now, back to the resolution as amended. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the resolution, approving the 2022 capital improvement program projects, resolution 63-21, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We will move on to item E, 17, approval of the 2021 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations. Resolution 66-21. This does require a 2/3 majority vote of the board. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Robinson and second by Supervisor Fisher. Is there any discussion? Any discussion on the budget transfers? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the 2021 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations, Resolution 66-21, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed to the motion, signify by saying no. Motion carries and is unanimous, and it is 2/3. Thank you. Moving on to item F, F18, approval of the tentative redistricting plan, resolution 69-21. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Butke and seconded by Supervisor Seiler. Is there any discussion? Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I stated last Thursday, I do have some concerns relative to the redistricting plan. The courts and others have set up certain standards by which they can judge whether there's equal representation, and one of those is a standard deviation between the largest and the smallest district of 10%. We're currently at 14%. I don't intend to oppose the tentative plan at this time, but would hope that between now and the development of the final plan, which will again come before us, that we can get closer to that 10%, so we truly have more equal representation. I know it's difficult in trying to honor municipal lines and other things, but I would hope that we would work as a goal and work with the local units of government as they're developing their ward boundaries to try to make that a more realistic goal of that 10% standard deviation versus the 14% that's contained in this plan.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Seiler.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to Supervisor Robinson's concerns. I was wondering if, with the chair's permission, if I could ask Andy Faust, I see Andy's in the back of the room, with Regional Planning Commission, okay, let me get the correct name, North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning. And I know Andy's done a lot of work for us. Thank you. It's been very, I know it's been a challenging process. But during the presentation that Andy and Dave gave to the redistricting committee, Supervisor Robinson's concerns were shared. And the question was asked if the current 14% deviation is really that much, well, I should say, because of the size of our county and the rural characteristics of it, that the 14% is not that out of touch. And so I just wonder, with the chair's permission, if I could ask Andy to speak to that, and if that is really a significant legal issue.
Is there any objection by the board? Seeing none, Mr. Phelps.
Yes, as was mentioned before, it's kind of that balancing act between keeping those districts equal as possible. And there's usually kind of a halfway, you know, when you got rural counties that keep that equal districts, do get difficult. We did accomplish getting close to that 10%, a little bit under 10% with some dividing up of some of the municipalities and towns. And so you got to decide, you know, what your threshold is of that deviation. Is it okay to have a deviation a little bit higher in these rural counties and keep your communities of interest together? Or do you just draw a line and say we're going to get districts that are substantially equal in population and we don't care about small little wards? It's a balancing thing. I think you did a pretty good job of doing it. I think there's some work that could possibly be done on the edges, and I think we can get those, the deviations down a little bit with some work with the municipalities. Now remember, this is your tentative plan, and there's some, work that can be done. Most of that work happens internal to the districts for the municipalities to draw their wards, but I think there is some work if folks want to do it on the edges. Now, I don't know if everybody wants to do that, but you possibly will divide up some of your municipalities a little bit more, and it'll just have to be the decision of the board what your wishes are to do. Hopefully that answers your question.
Sure, thank you. If I may, one follow-up. And also, we had some comments that day, and we did have, again, some public comments last week on the complexity of all the school districts, which wasn't information that is always available to us right away. And I know there were some examples of how complicated that could be, and for some districts or some towns that could possibly mean 9 ballots because of the school districts. Is there any way to have that in the, as you are doing your work and working with the committee with this? It's a complex endeavor, no doubt, but how much does that play into the deliberations as far as trying to respect our local towns and the clerks,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's a balancing between those two things. For the school district boundaries, you get different ballots for school referendums and school board elections. Unfortunately, your school district follows parcel boundaries, and they don't always follow the census district boundaries, so it makes that difficult. But you do want to make elections easy to manage, that aren't confusing, and you don't have 9 ballots in one town if not necessary. So you got to take that into account as you draw the districts along with that equal population. I think you got to balance it in between both. And I can't tell you there's a right or wrong answer. I think you got to make a decision on yourself which one you can live with for another decade and do it. And it happens in a lot of the rural counties where they kind of, battle a little bit with that issue of which one's the right way to go. Some just draw a line saying we're going to keep equal districts. Our job is to create equal districts and not make the jobs easy for the clerks. But what typically happens is sometimes those plans are very hard to pass because the municipalities are not very happy with those plans and those deviations. So as a board, you got to just kind of get that balancing point, which makes a good solid plan that everyone can live with for 10 years.
Okay.
And you're not going to make everyone happy no matter what you do.
Thank you.
Okay, Any other discussion? Any other questions?
Supervisor Mask?
Supervisor Mask, go ahead.
Thank you. I think that this map is about as fair as we can get until we hear from the municipalities. I think that once they look at the boundaries and figure out what's going to work for them and be the least amount of work and the best for the whole county, I support this map. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, the motion is to approve the tentative redistricting plan as presented, Resolution 69-21. All those in favor of that motion to approve the tentative redistricting plan, Resolution 69-21, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed to the motion, signify by saying no. And the motion is carried, and we will move on to miscellaneous business. Item G19, announcements and/or requests. Supervisor Robinson.
There will be a special meeting of the HR Finance and Property Committee meeting on Friday at 10:30 for the purposes of approving a urban forestry grant request to the DNR to cover damage associated with the July 28th storm, but we have to have that submitted by Monday, and therefore the need for the special meeting on Friday.
Okay, any other, Vice Chair McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to let the rest of the board know that the Rules Review Committee is going to be meeting again on September 30th at 8 a.m. in the morning here in the Assembly Room, and then October 14th at 2 p.m. in the Assembly Room. So everyone's welcome. We're going to start getting into discussions about the actual rules. The first meeting was kind of a brainstorming meeting to get some ideas, but I welcome all input from all the supervisors, so thank you.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On October 20th, we'll have the Eastern Towns Association meeting. That's in the town of Eldron. The meeting starts at 7 o'clock, and there will be a lunch beforehand. Thank you. And that's on a Wednesday.
Okay, Eastern Towns is October 20th at 7 p.m. Any other announcements? Do need signatures from HR Finance, Health and Human Services, and Exec Committee. So anybody that's here, by all means, please stop and sign. Supervisor Harris is next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On Tuesday, October the 5th, at 6:30 p.m. at the UWSP Wausau campus, A Walk in Their Shoes is presenting the Freedom Riders, and there'll actually be 2 freedom riders from the civil rights movement that'll be present. So be a great educational presentation. It's open to everyone and it's open to the public, and it's free. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Okay, seeing none, we are down to item 20. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Seefeld to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Harris. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed and want to stay here forever, go ahead and say no. The motion is carried. We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great evening.